Hello and welcome along to another EFL Manager special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm joined by Craig Savage and we are talking about League Two today because we're talking about Walsall, who have appointed Matthew Taylor, a former Luton youth player, so someone we will have seen play a lot of times, as their new head coach, taking over from Brian Dutton, who left after an interim stint at the end of last season. So we'll talk a little bit about where Walsall are at the moment, perhaps where Matthew Taylor is going to improve them, and what we think he's going to do in his first permanent head coach role. So plenty to get through, of course. We'll talk a little bit about Walsall on and off the pitch as well. But Craig, just your initial reaction, because this one, I guess, probably more of a surprise appointment than most of the others we've done this summer. And most of the others have been largely experienced coaches, whereas this one, bit of a punt at the other end of the scale. So what were your first thoughts when you saw this earlier today?
Yeah, I was completely surprised. I think it's a risk, but it's a club like Walsall that's given someone who's relatively new to coaching. He's also done a bit at Spurs and had a short stint at Swindon. But it's giving him a chance. And then you could say, yes, it's why not? It's why not move? Walsall didn't have the best seasons last season. And it's gone for someone relatively new rather than experienced.
Yeah, and I think it would be fair to say with the head coach role, and we'll talk a bit about the assistant in a moment, which I think is a very wise move in terms of going for experience. But in Matthew Taylor, they've gone for someone who they clearly want to focus on the coaching side with the players they've got. They have been a club that, I mean, most clubs outside the Premier League are selling clubs to an extent. But either way, they've got a technical director in place. The transfer side, it doesn't look like he's going to be heavily involved in. It is about someone who's been identified as a good coach and given an opportunity to improve players in a lower league. And you probably can't fault a club in the current pandemic and the current financial climate for having a go at that.
No, not at all, because I think they've gone for previous coaches that had a lot of experience. Like Darryl Clark was obviously before Brian Dutton. He had a lot of experience with Bristol Rovers, and obviously also just lost their way a bit. Obviously, a couple of seasons before that, they got relegated from League One into League Two, and not really had that challenge to get back into League One. So I think the club definitely needed to go in a new direction. And I think they maybe needed to invest in a bit more youth. Someone like Matty Taylor could bring in more youth. I think it's from that point of view that they can hopefully they attracted Matty Taylor in, because obviously they sold a few players in the season, mainly Elijah Adebayo. Obviously we're going to talk about them from last season in a second, but they wouldn't have that much money to recruit new players in, go heavily in the transfer market. Hopefully with a technical director they can find some free transfers in there, maybe, and probably invest in some youth players. So I think that's probably the reason why Matty Taylor joined them.
Yeah, and absolutely. And to be fair, they are a very good coaching team that they've got together now, because Matty Taylor obviously experienced at the Premier League as a coach and plenty of experience at the top level as a player. And probably the wisest move is the fact that as number two, he's brought in Neal McDonald, who has coached in the Football League, has managed in the Football League with the likes of Blackpool and Carlisle. He obviously worked with him when he was number two to Phil Brown at Swindon. So he's got that experience of knowing what he's like on a day-to-day basis. And he's actually managed on the continent as well, albeit in briefer stints. So he has got a coaching experience. He's worked with some wonderful managers, Neal McDonald, and he's got that experience of being a number one. So for Matty Taylor, appointing a number two of that experience has got to be a very wise move, going with an inexperienced head coach.
Yeah, it's very similar to Nathan Jones. He's bringing in Paul Hart.
Yeah,
obviously he knew Paul Hart from in previous clubs. I think it's a good appointment to bring someone with a lot of experience. Obviously, let Matty Taylor obviously make their decisions, but for the wise head, a bit of experience, give that a second opinion. And Nathan Jones, it worked perfectly for him. So he obviously, to Matty Taylor's going to make mistakes along the way. It's his first real coaching role professionally. So he will make mistakes down the line, but it's with someone with Neal McDonald's experience. Obviously, he was under number two under Big Sam at West Ham.
Yep.
So Neal McDonald has that experience, and it's a very safe assistant coach.
Completely agree. But we've got to talk a little bit about Walsall last season. And I do feel a bit talking about Brian Dutton's stint in the second half of last year in interim charge, because he had a squad that was depleted after January. They made late sales. And as you mentioned, they talked about the fact we won't be able to reinvest this money. This is to keep us afloat. And I mean, in his interim stint the second half of the year, 20 games in charge, 3 wins, 8 draws, 9 defeats. It's not a great record. And they only just passed the 50-point mark and stayed up in sixth bottom. But you do mention the fact that they lost key players in January. And like Elijah Adebayo, being a key example that we know as a Luton fan, it's been sold on to a higher club. And they're looking at that conveyor belt of, can we get a player out of non-league? Can we get a player that's been released from a Premier League club? Can we get a good youth player on loan? And for a coach like Matthew Taylor, he's coming into a situation where the club hasn't particularly been picking up points in the second half of the year. But do you necessarily see that as a negative, given the fact there's going to be so many players coming in over the summer and so much change in the squad?
I would presume Matty Taylor would have known about the squad before taking the job. Obviously, who's out of contract in the summer, and he might have some saying that beforehand. Obviously, he's not officially starting to June 1st until he finishes his coaching role at Spurs. But I presume he would have known anyway, because there's no point taking the job on and go, right, by the way, these are the players that get released. So he would have some saying it beforehand before taking the job. But as you said, like, recruitment's obviously, I think it's going to be key this season, well, in the summer. COVID obviously has played a major part in changing the way of recruitment at this summer and last summer as well. So it depends on obviously the fans. And to be fair, Matty Taylor's got a free hit. Obviously, new fans. Obviously, fans are going to be returning to the Bescott in August. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I know there's obviously games going on in the Football League, playoffs, and fans are there, and it's great for that. But hopefully, the rest of the 72 can get fans in. So they need the fans there. I think I say it for most clubs. I think they needed the fans there because I don't think they would have finished high because they lost. As I said, they lost Elijah Adebayo, who's still their top. I think he's the top goal scorer still, and he left in January. So obviously you can tell obviously how much they missed him. I think he will know what players he wants to make.
Yeah, and I think if we look at Walsall as a whole from the end of last season, the one thing you want as a coach or a manager coming into a role is knowing exactly where you need to improve. And with Walsall, I think it's pretty clear. They scored 45 goals in 46 games, less than one a game, the sixth lowest scorers in the league. And they drew 20 out of 46 games. No side drew more in League Two last season. And I think that tells you it's the failure to convert draws into wins. It's the failure to turn a solid defence into a good attacking display, a 1-0, a 2-1 win. And that's got to be the sort of thing, if you can strike lucky and find another Adebayo from the lower leagues or from the youth academy or on loan from a top tier club, that could be the difference between 19th and top half and chasing the playoffs with League Two and the EFL how it was last season, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's literally getting over the line. It's clearly a mentality thing for these players. I don't think they believed in themselves a lot more. As I said, once Adebayo went, they lost that bit of belief. 45 and 46 is not good. As you said, it's clearly putting the ball in the back of the net is the main problem. Because defensively, it wasn't too bad. -8 goal difference. It's just putting the ball in the back of the net. And I think that would be probably Matty Taylor's first target, is a striker that can score goals and probably that creative player that can actually set the striker up. So, yeah, there is a lot of room for improvement for Walsall, clearly. It's just trying to find that special player.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the ones that everyone's searching for. So we'll see how good the recruitment team is down there. But I think, like you say, defensively, they weren't bad. So I'm just looking, their last 20 games of last season, they didn't concede more than 2 goals in any of the games. But 10 of those 20, they didn't score in. It's very clear where the problem is. And like you say, defensively, and looking at a positive from a coaching point of view, that defensive structure, it is there. There isn't a huge amount to do defensively. And often when managers are coming into a clubs and we're talking about clubs that are struggling, we were always saying in these manager specials, and we sound a bit like a broken record, the first thing they've got to do is shore up the defence. But this is one of the few episodes and one of the few managerial appointments where that isn't actually the case. Moving on to next season, which is where we start to put you under pressure and where we start to get predictions in. And I will say this, I guess if we go reputation-wise, Bolton were the side that everyone expected to go up, and they have gone up from League Two. We're going to be getting one of the clubs that have been up there for many a year. All 4 of the sides in the playoffs have been perennial top half sides in recent seasons. One of those is going to be going up as well. None of the big reputation sides, talking like the Wigans that people might have thought, have come down. So League Two is going to be a very competitive league between a lot of like-minded sides next year who are fighting for the same pool of players. So, as we said, a little difference, 1 player, 2 players can make the difference between 5, 10, 15 positions in a league. But for you, for the pressure of next season, for Matthew Taylor in his first head coach role, where do you think Walsall are going to be and how do you think they're going to do in League Two?
Well, I hope they give Matty Taylor time. Let's say it's a new role. If it starts disastrously, but he has to learn in the day, and you've got to give the man a chance. If it's someone that had a load of experience and started disastrously, and you can probably say, maybe it's not working. But for someone like young Matty Taylor is as a coach, give him the season, at least give him the season. How do I see them going for the season though? Is I think probably a top half finish. he recruits well. I would say probably on the table, to be fair. I'm not expecting. I think the expectancy should be low. I'm not saying Matt Taylor will be boring. I just think they'll be hopefully. I think give them a couple of years, they'll be up there. I think next season, let's get out from 19th. Let's get mid-table. That'd be my limit if they get a good striker and they can score goals. Maybe the season after, they'll probably push on for playoffs.
Yeah, I think my only worry was that I was largely in agreement with you thinking about it previously. The only worry I have is with a disastrous start, will he get time? Because even last year at the bottom, you see the likes of Barrow panicked very early and other clubs around there as well have done so. I do also worry about the fact that if they do find that young striker, if they do find that young creative player who's very good, will he have to be on his bike in January again? If a League One or a Championship club comes in with the money, and will that affect Walsall's season? So I'm not sure that the expectation will be to get them up in that top 7 or anywhere near it, because I think Walsall, like many clubs in the EFL, are going to have to balance the books, and it's going to be a fine balancing act next year. But I think given time, I think given the right resources and the right work with the recruitment team, I think he can take them up to a comfortable, consolidated position, which I think after this year would be a very good season for them. But as we've said in many of these manager specials this summer, it's not important what Craig and myself think. It matters what the Walsall fans think. So let us know down in the comments what you made of the appointment. Was it as much of a surprise to you as it was to us? And of course, how do you think he'll get on? Are you impressed or pleased to see that there's an experienced number 2 alongside him? And what are your expectations for the season ahead, both on and off the pitch? If you like what you saw, though, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for regular content from the Honest Football Podcast. Thank you to Craig for joining me as always. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. And hopefully, we'll see you next time.